Yo, people, welcome back to the YouTube channel again. A returning guest, a great guest, and a real channel that over the World Cup especially has just, do you know what I'm saying? And we were speaking about it backstage. The graft has certainly been rewarded. I was really happy to see it as well. Filippo Silva, do you know what I'm saying? Guys, he is American, but he is Brazilian also, do you know what I'm saying? Born and raised in Brazil. So that's why, especially for this this show we have him on, because we're going to get some expertise on some of the Brazilian wonder kids that we've been going after, and also potentially looking like we're going to now sign. By the time this comes out, it looks like maybe officially it'll be done. Here we go is being given by Fabrizio, it seems. So first of all, bro, how are you? Absolute pleasure to have you on for this. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back here. We've been here to talk about Palmeiras before. I guess Christian Pulisic at some point too. But I'm happy to talk about the Brazilian wonder kids too. And you talked about the World Cup. A big part of the growth obviously was the US, but covering Brazil was probably one of the driving forces. And happy to be here again. And just gonna start congratulating Chelsea right away, because I think you guys got one heck of a talent right there, Andrey Santos, that we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, we're going to start with him and then we'll get to a second target. But this is the one that's closer. That seems to be a formality, seems to be concluded. Andrey Santos, I don't know about the player at all. I've only been able to now see his name going around, obviously, the last couple of days, watch a few comps, read a few articles. Box-to-box midfielder, tall, imposing, good ball carrier. Even Secret Scout was saying as well, potentially, who kind of knows a bit behind the scenes, that he can play in a back three. I was going to ask you about that as well. But obviously for the Brazilian under-20s, like you were saying off air, seems to be a standout player. At this young age, he's playing the second division, wasn't he? It still is.
So he played for Vasco. Well, he comes from Vasco, right? That's actually, despite them being the second division, that is a massive club in Brazil, right? Arguably the second biggest club in Rio, just behind Flamengo, but they were going through rough times and they were in the second division. He started for them pretty much every single game that he was available. And they got promoted. They're back in the first division. So technically he would be playing the first division, but he balled out and played very well in the second division. And he is seen in Brazil as, out of the U20 prospects, he is one of the top ones, especially in the midfield. But you asked about the back three. I didn't personally see that. And just to be clear, I didn't watch every Vasco game. It's a team I do follow. I grew up in Rio. I do follow Vasco. I've been to many games at São Januário. That's their stadium. And I mainly saw him playing in a double pivot midfield, right? Sometimes I saw Vasco playing, I think it was a 4-2-3-1. I seen a 4-4-2, and he's always one of the double pivot central midfielders. And I think I've seen, I'm trying to remember, because when I watched the game, I'm not specifically scouting him, but I could be wrong, but I think I saw him play as a lone six for the Brazil U20s. I haven't really seen him play as in a back three, maybe as a central defender, like a sweeper. But I can see some attributes to his game that could work there, depending on the level that he's playing. Obviously, when it comes to playing the center back position, usually you don't want players that are very young. It's a position that takes a while to develop. That's why sometimes you see teams even playing center backs as right backs very often, like Sergio Ramos started that way, and we can talk about many others.
Even Steven Gerrard as well, actually,
Yeah, so I can see some attributes to his game, which I'm sure we're going to address that soon, that could fit for him there. But I've seen more quality to him playing as an 8, as a box-to-box, or a lone 6, because he has a lot of composure in that midfield.
Okay. I was going to ask that because one of Chelsea's, and we don't know really, I guess you'll be able to help us kind of point towards where he'd fit in this team in terms of his level, his development. What part of this club would he go straight into, whether that be the development team or would he go straight into the first team? What kind of level are we expecting to get from the player? Obviously, concluding that he will acclimatize and settle in and all these other things personally that will be challenges as well. But you talk about him playing in that lone 6 because Chelsea right now, their midfield is so imbalanced and we haven't got DMs or holding midfielders coming through the academy. So I'm seeing us buy up a lot of midfielders and the ones we even have in our own academy, like Lewis Hall, like Charlie Webster, but there isn't any holding midfielders. A lot of them are similar to what you've described, which is a ball carrier or box to box, someone that plays next to a DM. So many players, even Carney Chukwuemeka that we signed, so many players that could play as advanced 8s or next to DMs, but no actual DM. But you feel like depending on his development, he could be disciplined or molded into that position, do you feel?
Yeah, I think he can. He has a lot of composure on the ball. He knows how to distribute. He's very technical, and he does have that athletic ability that you mentioned. My only thing is, like, it's also he can play there. Would that be the best way to utilize him? He scored a lot for Vasco in the second division of Brazil, right? 8 goals as an 18-year-old in the league in 30 matches or so, or maybe a little bit over 30 matches. I think he could develop into that role. Maybe playing more as a 6, or maybe in a double pivot, he can be more of the defensive side double pivot, like Casemiro sometimes will play in a double pivot. He's always the more defensive one. I'll tell you one thing, based off age, he looks better than a Casemiro at that age, right? Obviously, you got to take into account that making a jump from the Brazilian first division to the Premier League is already a massive jump. Now he's making a jump from the second division to the Premier League. So we got to always keep that in mind. But nevertheless, there were plenty of I wanted my club to sign him, Palmeiras in Brazil.
Yeah.
We were talking about, I was talking to the friends, I was like, wow, we should get him from Vasco, because they're kind of broke. They're not as wealthy as they used to be. They used to be a massive club there. I think Manchester United fans should remember in 2000, they beat them in the Club World Cup, and it was like 4-2. It was kind of like humiliating. They played much better, something you don't see nowadays with South American clubs against European. You don't see a South American club beating a European club, outplaying them.
I remember when we lost to Corinthians as well. Yeah.
Well, you outplayed Corinthians though.
Yeah. And we would I was so angry that game. But then even when we did the preview for Palmeiras, you were telling me exactly how Palmeiras would set up, and that's exactly what they did, is they kind of defended.
But in the 2000s, early 2000s, and even the 90s, you would see South American clubs go head-to-head with European clubs, right? They would outplay some of them. Now they will try to beat European clubs the way Palmeiras did to Chelsea, right? Let's defend, counter, use pace, and try to hit them in transition or the counterattack. But my question, like, the talent is there with Andrey. The hype is there. I saw comparisons to Jude Bellingham. I don't think that's the right way to put it. I don't think he's as dynamic as Jude Bellingham. Okay. He does have the ability in tight spaces. He is quick with the ball and progresses it forward fast. But I feel like it seems like Jude Bellingham is one of those players that's always 100 miles an hour, just always like putting a high tempo in the game. I felt like Andrey Santos knows when to calm down the game a little bit more composed on the ball.
Yeah.
And I also can't really say that he's the same talent level as Jude Bellingham, because we're seeing Jude do that in the World Cup. We're seeing Jude Bellingham do that in the Bundesliga. Andrey could be, but I just don't see it right now because he was playing a much weaker opposition. Now, I do want to add one thing that I do think is that was good for his development. Playing the second division of Brazil, as the level is lower than the Premier League, it's a very tough league to play. The fields are horrible. They are horrible to play. So if you're a technical player, it doesn't help you. The games are scrappy. They are violent. They're tough to play. So for an 18-year-old to come into that league that's hostile and actually perform and be mature in a club like Vasco, that Vasco doesn't have the influence or power that Chelsea has in money, but the pressure is as big, if not bigger, because in Brazil, there is a part of the fan base that could be a little bit nuts. That's just the matter. And the
ultras basically is what you're saying.
Yes, it can be violent. The pressure is big, but they love Andrey Santos. They love him. And I just said in Portuguese for you, Andrey Santos. They love him there, the Vasco. I have a lot of friends that are Vasco fans in Rio. So I think you guys got a good one. And what was the fee again? 20 million?
Yeah, around about that, yeah.
I think
that's a good fee.
It's worth the gamble, right? Real Madrid's paying, 70 million for Endrick? That's big money. You can actually sign a big player with that money. I think it's worth the gamble that you guys are getting. And I think hopefully Chelsea is patient. Because remember, Vinicius went to Real Madrid when he was 18 also.
And he took a while to get going. He struggled,
Yeah, so if Chelsea's patient, they can have a very special player there at age 21, 22. Understand he's a kid, he's 18, coming from a weaker league. He probably doesn't speak English, probably going to have to learn all of that. So as long as Chelsea is patient and develops the player, I think you guys have a very high ceiling central midfielder or a central defensive midfielder right there.
I think for me it's interesting because obviously we don't really see a lot of young Brazilians come into the Premier League straight away. They tend to go to La Liga, maybe a little bit easier to acclimatize. The weather, Real Madrid, Barcelona tend to snap them up. But then we've seen City take advantage by signing Alvarez. We've seen Enzo Fernandez go to Benfica. And in a very short space of time, these guys have become not only great players in their teams and worth a whole heap more than they were paid for, but then now they're showing on the international stage as well. For Andrey Santos and his level that you've seen, do you think he comes straight into the first team and he starts competing to get minutes? Or do you think this might be a situation where he goes out on loan? Because I was seeing with the work permit, they seem to be confident when they get these players with the work permit, but he could go to a Portuguese team on loan, etc. What do you think would probably be best for his development? Or would you say keep him close, kind of like a Phil Foden and look after him in that sense?
I would say it's better to keep him close, Chelsea, so he can adapt to England. Because if you want to keep him, let him stay in London, improve his English, work with the team, understand, adapt to that location. Sure, moving from Brazil to Portugal would be a smoother transition. Language is the same, a lot of similarities in the culture too, Brazil and Portugal, but I guess that wouldn't really help him adjust to England. That's a different country, different language, different culture. I would let him struggle a little bit with Chelsea. I don't think he'll have the same impact as an Enzo Fernandez, Julian Alvarez, because he's much younger. Julian Alvarez had played 3 or 4 seasons for River Plate in the Libertadores, the Argentina First Division, the Champions League of South America, the Copa Libertadores. Also, Enzo Fernandez had 2 or 3 seasons. Also, one of them he played very well in the Libertadores. So I don't see him having that impact because he's much younger. He played in one season in the second division of Brazil. And you're seeing that with Manchester City too. They signed Kaique from Fluminense, a winger, very talented winger, and they're having to send him on loan. He's not ready. He was with them in preseason. I don't think Andrey Santos would be ready. I think maybe one thing that can play in his favor is from an athletic ability standpoint. He's already physically built to be able to deal with physicality of big players, right? And the Premier League is a very physical league. It's very tough to play in that sense. So that can play in his favor. Maybe Chelsea holding him close, giving him some cup minutes, keeping him close might be a better option, and they can figure out from there. I think the main thing here is patience, because I talked about this with a friend of mine, because I used to not like when young players went to Real Madrid in the Galacticos era, for example. It was a toxic club. It was all about results now, but they changed. They became very patient with players. They do make big signings, but you saw them develop players like Valverde, Rodrigo now, Vinicius. It took them a while, but they were patient with it. And if Chelsea can do that and not pull the gun early, pull the trigger early like they did to players like Kevin De Bruyne and Mo Salah, be patient with the players, I can see players like him being successful. But to your question, I don't see Andrey Santos having any impact for Chelsea this season. Maybe becoming a sub next season. Maybe these 6 months that will end the season, having him close might be good. I just don't see him having an impact right away. He arrives in January, right? Right now.
I would believe so. Yeah. If it all gets closed, I would assume that he'd come in January. It wouldn't make sense to have him come any later. It's an interesting one because the settling period is crucial. I think if he gets settled in and he, acclimatizes, makes friends, gets used to the living, because he's very young to come halfway across the world, whole different country, different language, just a whole different style in terms of the league as well. But he looks like fundamentally, physically, he'll be able to handle that once he gets used to it. Those traits that I listed off in terms of the ball carrying, the strength, the dribbling, you've mentioned as well, in tight spaces, composure. I like the way you said that he can, adjust his tempo, because I think we have a lot of players these days that just want to play at 100 miles per hour constantly, quick, but they don't know how to calm it down and to be more composed and to pass through the lines. Do you think he's got that ability at the moment, passing through the lines and showing the creative side of things on the ball, as opposed to just dribbling and carrying the ball and being that type of creator?
I think one of the strong aspects of his game is the through ball. He has some very good through. He has range on his passing ability. So I have seen that a lot in the second division of Brazil. The two things that caught my attention was how he controls the tempo. He knows when to pick up the pace or slow it, which is very mature for his age. Ability in tight spaces. He gets out of tight spaces in situations with a lot of ease and composure in crappy fields. And he does put a lot of through balls to connect the counterattack, or even to a certain extent, of creativity. Not the same creativity as a 10, But, as an 8, playing as a central midfielder, good enough on that passing range. Possibly could improve with it. But he scores goals. He got a lot of goals this year. That is something that he does arrive well in the box, has some good range on his long shots. He does score goals. That's why I even mentioned about him not really playing as a lone 6 and more as an 8. If you have a central midfielder that can give you goals, that's what you want. 8 goals in 30-something games is not bad for a central midfielder in a season.
No, it's really good, actually. It's a really good return.
Probably, I could be wrong on this, but I think it was actually his first actual professional season.
Okay. That's mad, because the two things that we lack in that midfield is vision, is composure, is passing, and then also the defensive side of things with that lone 6 that we were speaking about as well. This is exciting. I really hope that he settles in well, because Chelsea have had a history of, and I'm sure you are well aware of it, of buying a load of young players and then loaning them left, right, and centre.
The loan army.
Yeah, the loan army, the previous ownership, loaning them left, right, and centre, kind of misusing and abusing, in my opinion. And then they kind of just get lost. And yeah, a few of them make it. But a lot of careers are damaged because of it as well. And the person becomes, not what they could have been in the game, and they're unsettled. They're constantly moving house from year to year, learning new languages constantly as well. And I hope that we're a lot more organized. I think we will be if we get this multi-club model off the ground as quickly as possible with this new recruitment team and everything. I hope we do look after the players that we are bringing in. Finally, on this player as well, what would you say is his weakness? What would you say that he's young, he's still developing, so they're, it's normal to have weaknesses, but what would you say is something in his game that probably doesn't allow him to come into this team too soon and does need to be maybe honed out of his game, or he does need coaching on?
I think the problem is judging based on where he was playing. Like I said, it is still the second division of Brazil. And despite having a lot of things that play against you playing there in terms of the environment, pressure, field conditions, hostile environments, he seemed like a very well-rounded midfield. I didn't see like any noticeable weakness. I guess one thing you can say is inconsistency, right? He's not perfectly consistent, but as an 18-year-old, that's what you would expect. But I didn't really see any noticeable weakness. He looked solid defending, great tackles, great interceptions, connected his passes, had composure. I guess the only weakness we could call out here is, can he do that? Can he sustain that level when you put the level up higher, when you have better defenders, better tactics, better scouting? I guess that's it. He's not tested at a higher level, but I didn't see any noticeable weakness to his game.
That's good to hear. I mean, at this point, it's just about Chelsea doing their side of things and obviously keeping some stability, not chopping and changing managers. That's probably the worst environment a young player would probably need, is to continuously keep seeing different managers, different systems, different styles. So that's something that we've had in the previous era that's also contributed, as well as maybe some of the choices of loan to Vitesse, etc. Now, hopefully in this new era, we won't see that. Let's talk about another player that I don't even want to butcher the pronunciation. So I'm going to let you, because you already know what I'm talking about, the second player here. I'm going to let you show me how to pronounce this name, because I'm shocking it.
Vitor Roque.
Hockey?
Vitor Roque.
Victor Hockey. Yeah.
Almost like it's not
it's not how it reads. It's not how it reads.
Yeah, it's not Roque, because people read it Roque. It's actually like Rocky, as in Rocky Balboa almost. So it's Vitor Roque.
I knew I was going to get that wrong, so that's why I'm glad I asked you.
Yeah, he's the forward for Atlético Paranaense. That had not just him, the club had an amazing season, right? They were finalists in the Copa Libertadores, which is the Champions League of South America. Unfortunately, they lost to Flamengo, which is a fantastic team. But Vitor Roque is another one that he has a lot of athleticism. The guy's very strong, right? I believe his age, is he 17 or 18 already? Might be 17, might be. Yeah, so he turns 18 in February. Very physically strong. And he was playing for Cruzeiro. I remember that. That was also in the second division, but they won the second division. He played a couple games, and then Atlético Paranaense signed him. I believe it was early this season for a couple million. It wasn't too much. They might have paid like $4 or $5 million. He can play out wide. He can play as a winger. He can play as a center forward. He has very good hold-up game.
Okay.
Very good hold-up game. And he has one thing that we call in Brazil, that when a player has estrela, which just means that he just shines in big moments. That's what we saw this season. Like Atlético Paranaense knocked out Palmeiras in the Libertadores, right? They were the current champions of the last 2 editions, and that was in the semifinals. And there were moments where it looked like Palmeiras was going to go through, but Vitor Roque came up with an assist in the first game, an assist in the second game, came in clutch, was one of the big reasons they made it to the final. And like I told you, in Brazil, there's a lot of pressure from the fan base. It's not easy to perform at that level. And he looked great. He was coached by Scolari. You might remember him. They coached Chelsea. Chelsea,
definitely. Yeah, World Cup winner.
08, Portugal, Brazil. He was the 7-1 coach, but he was also the one that won the World Cup in 02. But Vitor Roque is a very young, promising player. I saw him play on the left wing. I saw him play on the right wing, and I saw him play as a center forward. I personally liked him more as a center forward, but Atlético Paranaense, sometimes I think they would play their experienced guy, Pablo, up top, and then Vitor Roque would play there, sometimes wide. But it's another one of those players that's very promising. There's talent, there's athleticism, there's everything. Very smart player too. And he, unlike Andrey Santos, was actually tested at a higher level, right?
Okay.
He was
so you can kind of see why this interest has come about.
Yeah, it makes more sense. Well, actually, Andrey Santos makes sense too. There's probably a bunch of clubs that were after him already, and Chelsea just like, let me get him before someone else does.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because think about it this way. Y'all played Palmeiras, and I think Palmeiras would compete with a lot of the mid-table or lower-table Premier League teams. They would compete with them. And this guy has faced oppositions like that. Flamengo is a very good team, and he has performed against these great oppositions. I believe he was actually very important for them when they played River Plate also. I believe they knocked out River Plate, which is the team that developed Julian Alvarez, developed Enzo Fernandez, right?
Yeah.
And he performed. So he's a player that's been tested at a high level. Has he been tested at a Premier League level? No. But, I mean, it's part of the career, right? You move up as you play well. Now, you might wonder if he would have an impact for Chelsea right now. I don't think so. I don't think so. I know you guys are still like here and there at the center forward situation. Chelsea
very much so.
But I could see him being a guy that if y'all bring him in early, bring him in this January or during the summer, I could see him not next season, but on the other one when he's like 20, being already an impact player if he continues to develop. But again, it's very hard to judge. And I don't want people to think I'm overhyping players. These are 17, 18-year-olds, right? You don't know. Are they ready now? They're not. So you're pretty much betting on potential. The potential is high. Are they going to develop? That's a different question.
Yeah, that is a different question. I think that's mainly down to, of course, Chelsea. I think a lot of the players that come from South America, they have that different way about them, that determination. They face adversity. They can handle that. I think mentality is spot on most of the time. I think it's more about the talent's clearly there as well. It's just all about whether or not Chelsea create the environment and the stability for these players to flourish. So another, do you like what, I mean, Chelsea at the moment seem to have signed about maybe 6 or 7 in total by the end of this, if they were to secure these 2 as well. Players around the 18, 19 range, whether we're talking about Chukwuemeka, Fofana, all of these young 18, 19-year-olds that they're going for. And kind of like stockpiling in a way, like what they used to do under Michael and Manalo when we brought in all those Belgium young players as well, and with the loan army. Do you think that is a good way of doing things, to bring in a high volume of young players all around the same age and then have them kind of compete to see who makes it out alive, kind of thing? Do you know what I mean? It kind of feels like a war that they're trying to prep them for.
Yeah. Before I answer that, just to add one thing to Vitor Roque that I forgot. My only concern when he's playing center forward is his height. Okay, he is a short player. Okay, he's about you guys use feet and inches there in England, right?
Yeah.
He's about like 5'6", 5'7", maybe 5'8". So you see in the game.
We've seen short forwards do it here before. It's just whether, I think it's all about whether he can handle the physicality and the contact from the centre backs, because they are obviously going to be very
strong. He's strong.
Yeah. That's good.
But the height, he's not going to be a guy winning headers against Van Dijk, probably. So, But to your question, it's a tricky question, right? Because if you have a plan of how to develop these players, it's a wonderful plan it's wonderful because you're already bringing them in, you're developing them on your own, you already have the talent from others. Do I think it's the best way to go about it? I would personally go more towards what Brazilian clubs do, which is mainly like how much money has Chelsea spent on it? You mentioned something. You mentioned also Gabriel Stonino is another one you guys signed.
Yeah, exactly. The American goalkeeper, exactly.
Yeah. What about if you invest more money into your academy and try to develop more of your academy? Because Chelsea has had academy players that seem like they got overlooked, or so you could improve your academy and maybe study what certain academies that are successful do. Maybe look into what Ajax does, because I do see Chelsea producing great athletes. I do think some of them are not the best, and this is no bash on some of the players, but some of them do lack on some of the technical aspects.
Yeah.
Right. I see Conor Gallagher. He's a fantastic athlete, a fantastic player. No ability in tight spaces. Really struggles with that.
Yeah.
That's one example. We can talk about many others here. I think even, and some people from your channel will hate this, but even Mason Mount, I do think
people will agree as well. 100%.
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, I do think Mason Mount lacks on a lot of things in his game.
Could be a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll improve it. He's 24. I think he is who he is now.
23. Yeah. Hopefully he does. But
yeah, technique is something you really improve first on very young ages, from ages 7 to 12, 7, 14, and then you can keep improving it from 14 to 21. After that, the aspects of a game that a player play, and I coach youth here, right, in Orlando, in Major League Soccer in Orlando City. After that, ages 21 and after, it's more of like mental development, physical development. That's what starts to improve. So speaking of that, I think that's something Chelsea could work on more. Maybe their academy. It's cheaper. You also get clubs and you build a culture within. It's much more special for a player to play for the club that developed them, right? There's that aspect of it. You build an actual culture. We've seen that work with Barcelona in the past, right? Using La Masia to build a style of play, a culture, and an ideology and a philosophy for that club. When you bring all these different players, they come from different backgrounds, different ideas. I don't know how well you build a culture with it. Sometimes you fail the player. You talked about it, how you sometimes fail the development of the player, maybe because you don't fully understand how to develop that player. So if you have the money, sure, do it. And Chelsea has done it in the past. But I do think Chelsea would benefit more if most of the investment went into their own academy, because England is a big country that loves the sport. And if they do it correctly, they will develop players. And I see a little bit of Manchester City getting that. Like, for example, a Phil Foden. That's an English player that I talk about. Saka, too. These are English players that I talk about. They're a bit different from the old school English players. The technical ability is up. It's different.
You can see that.
It's
different. You can see that. I saw that today when I watched him, when this release the day before. You can see quality technique. Even Phil Foden, for instance, when he plays at his best for England, mainly for Man City when he's at his best, just in tight spaces, the little touches, the little give and goes, the ability to get past players. That is really what is lacking at times, and it's something that English football, they have a little bit more of now that they didn't have before. It used to be all about size and power and speed and all the attributes of athletics, and not really thinking about the technical players. The technical players would, a lot of the time at youth level, get turned away because they weren't strong enough, or they weren't tall enough, or they weren't quick enough, or even mentality wise as well. But that can go for anything.
Well, England used to love to play that 4-4-2 with two strikers up top, one being like a second striker, and the other one was the big man, right? The target man. But that's changed a lot in England in their development. It's just that some clubs maybe haven't done that fully, or the culture inside. It's a problem with the United States that I talk about, right? Develop technical players. But you are seeing that with England change quite a bit, because you see players that used to not really be the English style of play. Like I talked about, Saka is one of them that comes to mind. Phil Foden. Jude Bellingham is also a much different midfielder from what we've seen in the past with England, because a lot of the English players were like long ball merchants. A lot of them, they had that to their game. Jude Bellingham is dynamic. There's more to it, right? It's very different. I know he plays for Dortmund, but he was developed in England. So
in England,
I see that changing. I think Chelsea should focus on that personally. But it is what it is.
And also, actually, with the striker being so short, obviously aerially we know he's probably going to be dominated. So you're going to have to play the ball to feet. Again, little intricate play, close control, etc. Do you think a front two? Do you think he has the capabilities of leading the line on his own in the future in Premier League level, or do you think maybe in a two-man partnership would probably suit him?
You mean Vitor Roque?
Yeah.
I don't remember if he played alongside Pablo up top. I don't remember right now. I think he could play, but you got to look into his strengths too. He has very good hold-up game, can assist, can score. Didn't score too many goals, but Brazil is a hard league to score. Like, you don't see players dropping 30 goals a season. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I guess it's just hard to get stats there. Usually the top score of the league is between 15 to 20 goals. Don't know. I don't really know how to explain why.
It's quite low, yeah.
It is low. It usually is low. I guess Gabigol was scoring a few goals here and there. He got like 22. It's like, oh, good season. 25. That's a very amazing season. I don't know if his game is best with the front two. I don't think so. I don't know how we would partner him with, right? Because he's not a big man. That's not who he is. He has good hold up, can't combine, but I think he's better playing as a lone center forward in a front three, maybe two attacking midfielders behind him, or play him out wide. He can play out wide. Maybe not his best, but he can play out wide just fine. He's not a true winger, but he can play at the wing.
The reason why I ask is we also just signed Fofana from Molde, and he's also seems to be a striker as well. So I was wondering if they could be paired, or I don't even know if Chelsea are really thinking that far down the line, whether you could pair them to Amanda Broja, still pretty young, picked up a big injury. I think they're just stockpiling, bringing in these talents before the other teams in the mid-tables, or the RB Leipzigs, or the teams that have really done very well with their scouting recruitment. Yeah. Take them in, and then the price is overblown and they can't compete. So before we wrap up as well on Endrick, I mean, I have to ask you, because obviously Chelsea were interested, but we were never going to get him. I said it on this channel on All You Can Eat Chelsea. We had no chance. Once Real Madrid were in the running with Rodrigo, Vinicius as the future front three there, it was always going to go to Spain. Do you think he's worth what we've just seen paid for him? Because that's a massive fee for a 16-year-old. I was blown away. I mean, it's very rare that I get blown away by transfer fees now, but 70-odd million for a 16-year-old who's not even league. He can't even go to Spain now. He has to wait until 2024. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know what to tell you. If like he plays for my team, Palmeiras, right?
Yeah.
But I would tell you that I've never seen a 16-year-old like that in my life. Not even Neymar.
Oh wow.
It's he's like playing with grown man, pushing grown man, pressing and winning 50-50 duels with grown men at age 16. The kid is fearless, right? He went through a lot of struggles, including hunger, during his life, his childhood. He promised his dad he would make that. And I knew he was going to go to Real Madrid. I said that I was at Adrian's channel, Rabona TV. He made a video about Endrick, and I talked about that. He has the same, I believe, the same people that represent Vinicius represent him, the agency. So that was one thing. Second thing, there were multiple videos of Endrick saying, I want to play for Real Madrid. I want to play for Real Madrid. Last but not least, Mr. Perez right there, Florentino Perez, ever since he lost Neymar, he's not losing the top Brazilian wonder kid again. Yeah. And you tell me, is the fee crazy? I mean, we could look back at it 4 years from now and say it was crazy, or we can look back and say it was a bargain.
Yeah, Vinicius especially Jr. with inflation as well.
Yeah, that's another thing too. The fees might be going completely hectic. But Vinicius Jr. was signed in a similar scenario by Real Madrid. He was 16 or 17. He couldn't go to Spain, and they paid 45 or 50 million euros. It was something crazy like that. And I thought it was crazy at the time. I thought it was crazy. And as the years progressed, I was like, see, Vinicius is not really blown up. I think Perez got this wrong. And then all of a sudden, last season, and then this season too, proving it, he is one of the best wingers in the world. So was it worth it paying that for him? Yeah. I mean, now if they try to sign him, how much would Vinicius cost? Rodrigo was different because Rodrigo was signed when he already had played well professionally for Santos. So he was already balling out. So it was a bit different. Now, Endrick came in for Palmeiras this season at the second half of the season almost because he was 15. He's a young 16-year-old. He just turned 16 at the middle of the year. So he's going to turn 17 in the summer of 2023. And he got goals. I believe he had 3 goals, had an assist for Palmeiras, looked like he belonged. He might play a big role this season already at age 16 for a top 2 team in Brazil, Palmeiras and Flamengo. So I understand why Real Madrid paid that. The thing is, put it this way, if Real Madrid didn't pay that, some other club would.
Yeah.
So they just paid what they had to. It's like, you want that? We're going to pay. Chelsea might have paid it. They might have said, we're taking it. Because he could be the next big thing out of Brazil. And when you talk about Brazil, if he becomes the Brazil 9, the center forward for Brazil, it's not just a talent, it's also a very marketable player. You're going to make a lot of money from people watching him, money from jerseys. Brazil itself is a brand. So we could be wrong. And I mean, myself, I mean, I didn't hear your opinion on it. You might think
I'm not even sure. I've not watched him. So when I saw it again, I was like, this is insane.
The talent, he's far more dominant than Neymar was at this age. He's far more dominant than Vinicius was at this age. He's also very mature. He doesn't have that. He could change because now he's getting a lot of money, but he doesn't have that Brazilian party-like vibes. A very humble kid, determined, fearless. It's a very different. So I'm very, like, I would say bullish or very high on him. I think he will meet expectations. Now, it also depends, what are your expectations? Are you expecting him to be as good as Mbappe? Is that fee putting your expectation for him to be the new Neymar, Mbappe? What is he? His playing style is different. He's not going to be like that. I often tell people that he reminds me a bit of a mix of like Adriano because of the strength in the left foot, right? And a bit of like Romario because he's like good in the box and short. He's like not. And again, I don't know if he will be actually short. The kid is 16. He's going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. He's still going to grow. Yeah, exactly.
So he reminds me a little bit of a mix of those two, and we'll see how he adjusts. He has that Brazilian flair with strength, athletic ability, in a different mindset. I tend to say his mindset reminds me a bit of Vinicius Jr.'s mindset. Vinicius is like a very focused Brazilian. I know he dances, and that's just a Brazilian thing. They will dance. They will do that. But, you know, like Neymar, Ronaldinho, these guys always had the fame of partying and not being focused so much on soccer, despite the talent. Endrick seems to be more like a Vinicius, more of like going past like to a Kaká, more like focused.
Very head down, just.
But again, he's 16, a lot of money coming in.
Change,
he could change. Hopefully he doesn't.
And I hope the targets that Chelsea are going for, are they head down as well? How are they personally?
Andrey looks very composed. Yeah, he looks very good. That and Vitor Roque too. You see, the way you can judge it usually is by how well the player takes care of their body, and you see that they're very strong, they're prepared, their fitness levels, they don't get injured very often. That's another thing, because I mean, you need to have availability, right? It doesn't matter how good you are if you don't play. So they look like they are, from a mentality standpoint, the right place. And hopefully that changes a lot with Brazilian football or soccer, if there's an American watching, because it kind of seems like no one really questions the talent of these Brazilian teams, but it always seems like the mentality, there's something missing. And then you're like this World Cup, we saw them just break down at the end and lose to Croatia when they shouldn't have lost to Croatia. This U20 Brazilian generation is special, right? There's a lot of great players. Kaique, Angelo, you're going to hear many names. Marcos Leonardo, Endrick. I'm going to have to talk forever. Vitor Roque, Andrey Santos. There's also center back also named Kaique that went from Santos to Almeria in Spain, and at age 18, he's starting in La Liga. So there's a lot. The question is, are we changing the mentality? That's the only problem with Brazilian development. It's not really, no one questions the ability of these players that come out of futsal academies, all the technique they have. But as long as they get that mentality right, they'll be good. And it seems like this generation does have that. It looks like it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. I'm keeping an eye on these guys, of course, as a Chelsea fan, but also Endrick, because that's world football. You know, everybody wants to see what's going to happen. Yeah, bro, this has been a brilliant episode. I think we're not going to be surprised if we see more Brazilian talents linked with more Premier League clubs, more, you know, clubs around Europe. It's always been happening, but right now it seems like as if this U20 team that you're talking about, people are locked in and really investing big money. Bro, please let them know where to find you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, I'm hoping Chelsea have got this one right, man, with these two stars.
Well, they can find me on YouTube at Tactical Manager TV. On Twitter, it's just Manager Tactical, the reverse, and I'm sure they can find me on Twitter when you tweet this out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, as always. And I mean, look, as long as Chelsea improves their development there with these young players, I want them to sign more Americans and more Brazilians. My only concern with Chelsea is sometimes the Pulisic treatment. And I know all of us, Americans and Chelsea fans, that's where we collide.
Not
but
all
it's
Chelsea
just,
fans, yeah.
It's all out of passion. And again, just completely off topic, I really hope Chelsea utilizes Pulisic correctly, because we saw in the World Cup that there is something there that you guys can benefit.
There is something,
from.
yeah.
There
He
is
was playing well in the last couple of games before the break. Cameos and obviously Manchester City, but I don't know if he fancies him, to be honest. We'll have to see. He definitely doesn't fancy Ziyech, but Pulisic a little bit more involved, so you never know. But
yeah, hopefully he does.
But I've said to you even on your channel, I think best thing for Pulisic is to just move on and try and find another club, because I think the longer he stays in this rat race, the more confidence up and down. Whereas if he just goes somewhere where he's again very important from the off, I think he's gonna do all right. So we'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see. But guys, make sure you subscribe. Links will be in the description and in the title as always. And again, of course, this has been everything you need to know, because I didn't know. So I had to bring someone in who does. Do you know what I'm saying? I wasn't going to sit here and waffle and tell you something that that I didn't know too much about. So I had to bring in an expert. And yeah, these young players that we're bringing in, let's see if they can, go on a different journey than some of the previous ones that we brought in under Michael and Manalo. And until next time, big up your damn selves. In a bit, people. Peace.